everyone. Thank you for joining us. I'm Julia Cutler, and I want to take a minute to say thank you for taking the time to be here with us today. I'm joined here today with Daisy Dowling, who will discuss how to manage a better routine, build a better village of support, and feel more confident and in control as a hardworking mom or dad. Welcome, Daisy. We're very excited to have you here today.
Thank you so much for having me, and a warm welcome to you joining this conversation today. I'm delighted to be here with you to talk about how you can become a more successful and satisfied working parent, how you can bridge the two critical important spheres of your life, the professional and parenting on one side and the personal on the other, to bring together all those different identities and to do so with confidence, to be the parent, the person, and the professional that you want to be. Now, just to back up for 1 second and explain how I came to this niche, how I became an executive coach who works full-time with working moms and dads to do just that, to step forward in their careers, to succeed on the job, to reach their ambitions, and at the same time, be able to show up as the loving mothers and fathers they want to be. 9 years ago, as I was expecting my first child, I was working in-house inside a large corporation as a career and executive coach and advisor. And it struck me as I began to think about my own parenting that so much of the challenge that the people I was working with and supporting in their own career journeys had was not just about what they were doing professionally, how they were managing their teams, how they were able to deliver really good work day in, day out, the relationships they had with their managers and bosses. That was important. What was also critically important was how they were able to balance all of that responsibility and take care of the responsibilities and be the people they wanted to be at home. And I had that thought in my head, and it was frustrating to me that I wasn't able to provide people specific actionable advice on that part of their lives, on creating that bridge. Then, when I became a mom, I realized how many different questions I had myself about fulfilling my own career responsibilities while taking care of my brand new daughter. I couldn't find any great advice out there, things that really spoke to me individually as a person, my unique family, my unique situation, how I wanted to run my career, what I wanted to do and achieve and accomplish. And I couldn't get some of those specifics, how to find good care, how to manage my schedule, how to do all those things day in, day out that give us so much strain and stress as working parents. So very long story short, I went to the reliable source, other working parents who had been there. And informally at first, and in a small scale way, I began asking all of my friends, all of my colleagues, all of my coworkers, how do you do this? What is your best advice on working parenthood? How do you make working parenthood work? And I began collecting their stories, their wisdom, their insights, and using them for myself and test driving those pieces of advice they had given me. And 9 years later, I have now spoken to countless working moms and dads in all different phases of career, phases of parenting, different family structures, different fields, different functions, different parts of the country, different parts of the world, to get their insights as to how working parents along this entire journey can become more successful professionally and more satisfied in who they are at work, at home, and the bridge between the two. Now, and do that sustainably over time. Now, over the past year plus, those of us with young kids, my children are 7 and 9 now, have grappled not just with the regular challenges of working parenthood, but we've also dealt with the unprecedented challenge of the pandemic. So not only have we been working and caring for our children, but we've been teaching our kids at the same time. I know adding in the job of kindergarten teacher to my younger daughter on top of everything I had going on was a challenge like I've never experienced. So we've been dealing with not just the working parent challenge, but in the most extreme form possible. At the same time, all of the different pieces of advice and inputs that I've gathered from other working parents and the advice that I have for you here today as a coach There are things that each and every one of us, even under all of the pressures that we're currently under today, can do to take that important step forward to feel more confident and in control as working parents. So what I'm going to do now is share 6 key strategies that every working mother and father can use. They're based on those aggregate insights from all the different parents I spoke with. They're based on my experience as an executive coach and some of my own experience as a working mom through the pandemic, trying all this stuff out myself. But they're strategies that you can use also. I include them in my book, but I'm going to share these 6 most important key takeaways here because they're ones that are universal. And if you are a working parent, you can start using them as soon as you hang up. And if you maybe are not a working parent, but you've tuned in because you're a manager and want to support working parents on your team, or maybe you're a grandparent and you want to try and be helpful or understand the challenge or provide some support to your own child who is a working parent, or maybe you're thinking about becoming a working parent. These are things that you can use yourself and advise and use to coach other people around you too. So you're busy and we don't have a lot of time. So I'm going to move very fast through these 6 key strategies. And for the next 30 minutes or so, I'm going to do most of the talking. We do have a comment section here though, and I would encourage you as we go to start throwing some of your comments, questions, and reactions. Maybe other bits and pieces of advice that have worked for you as a working parent. Or if you want more detail on something that I've said, throw those into the comments section so that we can get a good conversation going. When we turn over to Q&A, we can address some of those really important things that are top of mind for you. And you can also hear from and connect with other working parents as we go. But all you really need to do right now is listen to these 6 key strategies and take them in and think to yourself, which ones are you maybe doing a little bit but can be doing more of? Which ones are brand new to you? If you hear things that you're already doing, that's great. Take that as a confirmation, as some encouragement that you're on a good path that's worked for so many other working parents. But if you hear things that are new, think to yourself, maybe I could try that out, or no, that wouldn't work for me, but this other piece of advice that she's sharing will. In other words, all you have to do is sit back and listen, but at the same time, your role here is a really active one. I want you to leave on the back end of this conversation, as in any good coaching conversation, I want you to leave with a plan, with 2 or 3 things that you're committed to doing that will help let you take that all important step forward. Now, without further ado, let's jump right in. 6 key strategies. I'm going to number them as I go just to keep us organized, but there's no particular order to them. You can use them in any sequence you wish. The first strategy, and if I leave you with absolutely nothing else on this call, if this is the only thing that you take away, I want it to be this. It's to understand your working parent template. Your working parent template is the collage-like collection of different pieces of advice, observations you've made, and experiences you've had with working parenthood over the course of your entire life. Those bits and pieces have come together and in that collage have formed a really firm, solidified impression or view that you have about what working parenthood, and more importantly, about what good working parenthood and good working parents do and are. Let's say, for example, that your own mom worked full-time when you were growing up, but she had a job that she was able to leave every day at 5 p.m. and come home and cook dinner for the family, and you all sat down together and ate around the table together each night. If that's the case, you may have internalized and gotten that very important example. You may have internalized the idea or the notion that good working parents can draw really firm time boundaries between work and home responsibilities, between their time on the job and with their kids. Or that working parents who are good, committed working parents cook for their families all the time or always eat dinner together. If, for example, so that's one way your template may have been formed. But if, for example, you are part of a social media group and you have all of the other moms in that group telling you that as soon as you have your second child, you really need to think about going on a flex time arrangement. You may have internalized the idea that that's what good moms do, or it's inevitable that after your second child, you really need to seriously rethink the hours you're working or change the structure of your work. Now, those are two very specific examples. And yours are probably going to be highly different. But I want you to go back whenever you have some time, a clean sheet of paper, and 20 minutes to yourself. I want you to go back and think about the examples and the working parents that you saw growing up, the advice that maybe you got from people as you were doing your professional training, early professional mentors, the people you work with, some movies, TV, social media, how you've seen working parenthood portrayed. And I want you to think about all those different impressions and how they've come together to form your impression of working parenthood as a total. And here's why. Because your impressions, your working parent template is neither right nor wrong. It's not good or bad. It's valid, it's realistic, and it's yours. It's based on your personal experience. But if you don't take the time to understand it, it will control you rather than you being in control of your working parent thoughts, actions, and feelings. If during the course of this pandemic, for example, you're still carrying around that template view that good parents cook for their kids or always sit down to dinner with their children or with their family, if you have that idea, or the idea that moms or dads should be able to split their time between work and not work in the same way that your own parents did, for example, then you may, the next time you order in dinner, because you've been working incredibly long hours and also overseeing distance learning and taking care of your house and doing so much, you may feel like, I'm not really fulfilling my responsibility as a working parent. And that's what you don't want to have. You don't want to be dragging around a bag of rocks with you, a template that may be formed by other people's lives, reality, and experiences that are valid and important for them, but that don't necessarily apply to the reality and to the set of choices and circumstances that you're facing today. Once you have that template, some of your notes down on a piece of paper, the different bits and pieces that have shaped your view of working parenthood, try to take a step back and to look at it and say to yourself, okay, but how well does this really match my day-to-day in the normal course of business and my day-to-day during the pandemic? And then allow yourself to step away from it and say, it is okay that other people have given me X piece of advice, or that I've internalized Y view on working parenthood. But in the current day, in a 24/7 work type environment that has been created by all the wonderful technology we use for work day to day, in my particular family structure, with the career that I've committed myself to, I'm going to make different choices and create a template that's all my own. So that's number one. Understand, map it out, understand, and then be able to take a step back from and look more neutrally at your working parent template. It'll make you feel better. It'll allow you to perform better in both spheres of your life. Number two, start drawing more and firmer boundaries between work and not work, time and headspace. Now, I know I'm giving this piece of advice at a point in time when all of us feel like the boundaries between work and not work have basically completely disappeared. For years, we've been encouraged to think of work-life integration as this wonderful goal. And now we've gotten to the point where we can hardly discern when we're on and when we're not on, working-wise and parenting-wise. If you are working from home throughout this pandemic, you know exactly what I mean. You probably wake up in the morning, and until the very moment your head hits the pillow and you fall asleep at night, you're kind of moving along, trying to do right, trying to, extend your efforts in both directions, trying to oversee homework while you're also dialed into a meeting, trying to take care of your toddler while reciting mentally your to-do list for all the things that you have going on at work. But here's the challenge. You're not going to feel great about either of those two spheres when you're only giving partial attention. And neither your kids, nor your colleagues, nor your clients, nor anybody else at work wants 50% of you. The important thing for you to do for your own performance in both of those areas, as well as for your sense of confidence and control, is to draw in whatever artificial or even kind of goofy ways that you can some distinction between your parenting self and your professional self. Here's what that might look like. Let's say you have a home office and you can go in and close the door and say to yourself, even if you're only going to be able to keep that door closed for 10 minutes or for an hour, that while you are in there, that you are completely 100% focused on whatever it is you are doing professionally, and you're not going to let yourself think about everything that needs to be done in the rest of the house or with your kids during that time. Maybe you don't have a physical barrier or boundary. Maybe it's time bound. Maybe you could commit to yourself to actually closing your laptop, or to stepping away from work after a certain time at night, or to not starting work or checking your messages before a certain time in the morning, to delineate your day and to allow you to completely transition from professional self into mom or dad mode. Maybe you have to do something even a little bit more sort of artificial to signal to yourself that you are in one sphere or another. Now that a lot of us have been working at home, we've been dressing a little bit more casually. Well, maybe when you put on a jacket or put on a pair of shoes, that's your signal to yourself that you're in professional mode. I know all of these things sound small. It's like, well, I can't draw very firm boundaries, or I'm going to have to go back and forth in very quick succession. Maybe I don't have the luxury of being able to turn away for more than 5 minutes right now from one sphere to attend to the other. But even if it's in very small bites and very small amounts of time, you want to be able to draw that line and very deliberately step over it so that you can show up as the professional, focused, attentive, directed, on point, high performing when you are actually doing that. And that when you pivot into parenting mode, you can draw a very firm line and become the mom or dad you want to be, that you can transition across it. Now, I have one client, and I love this particular trick. I have one client who actually keeps a family photo on her desk. And every time she switches back and forth between professional mode to parenting, which is a lot because she's got really little kids at home that she's taking care of right now, she touches the family photo almost as if she's touching a light switch. And it's her signal that she can pivot completely from one sphere to the other. Find whatever is going to work for you and then use that. Stick to it. Make it a regular habit, and you will find that you will be more confident and feel more capable in each sphere because you are allowing yourself to fully engage with it, to temporarily relinquish the other instead of doing that 50-50. Number 3, build your village. Now, it's a really old saying that we've all heard, that it takes a village to raise a child. What they don't tell you when you become a working parent is that it takes a pretty large, robust, well-built out village to raise the child. You need a lot of help and support. And a lot of times it feels like you're not getting as much of it or as much as you need. Because when you come home, when you bring the baby home from the hospital, or you come home for the first time as a working parent, you don't just find all of those villagers sitting in your living room, tons of people, a whole army there, ready and willing and capable of supporting you. As a working parent, you become the mayor of your village. It's your job, it's your responsibility, it's on you to think about how to recruit some of those villagers, how to make the village bigger, how to build it out and construct it and architect it in the way that's going to serve you, to get yourself the help and support you need. Now, when I say that to most working parents, they immediately sort of kind of pull back a little bit. And I understand absolutely why. It's because each and every one of us thinks about help and support it as being big ticket things, as being, well, Mary Poppins isn't going to come and help me, so I don't know exactly what kind of support I can get or help caring for my kids. I want you to think about small shreds of support you can get that aggregated, that put together can help give you the lift that you need. A way to find all of those, a way to try and get those little pieces of additional help and support that you can probably access, is to use a tool that I describe in the book and that's posted on the website, a tool for you to use called 8C. In the 8C model, it's a worksheet that you can do by yourself or that you can do with a friend or with your partner if you have one. In 8C, each C stands for a category or a type of support that you can get. That includes within your career. So your manager, mentor, sponsors, other people at work who might be able to help or influence how you're able to be a working parent. It might be colleagues, people who can give you advice and support, who are in your day-to-day workplace, who have been there before, who have seen this movie and can tell you what it was like for them to come back from leave, or for them to manage their child's schooling while also performing in the same organization. It might be corporate or organizational support, special benefits or programs that maybe are buried someplace deep there on the, on the intranet site of the institution, the organization, the company that you work for, but that you haven't used or you don't know about. Maybe there's a special, backup care benefit, or maybe, within your health plan, there's a coaching or counseling service just for new working parents. Maybe there's clinical or kind of care support that you can get that, at your healthcare provider, at your doctor's office. Maybe one of the nurse practitioners there can help give you some advice about getting your child to sleep through the night better so that you can get some rest and be a working parent. Maybe there's computer or IT support that you can use to help you manage all the logistics that you have to manage in the day in, day out. Like you can throw groceries onto an app for automatic reorder. You get the point here. You're not going to find one single source of support or care that's going to completely transform your life. But by looking at this problem holistically, by treating it almost in a way like a work project, being thorough, pushing the envelope just a little bit, and thinking about all the different categories of support that you might be able to use, whether that's, part of your community, maybe, it's a paid or volunteer caregiver, whatever it is. If you string all of those together, if you think about them as a total, and you can increase the support in each one, or even just a few by a little, it will completely transform your working parent operating system. Just the way a computer has an operating system, you have an operating system too. All of the things that sort of go on day to day that you want to have happen automatically or normally, so that you don't have to constantly be in firefighting mode or thinking about them. So go through the 8C model. Think career, colleagues, corporate, care as part of a couple, clinically, in your community. What different bits of help and support can you get? And how might they help you take care of your child, help you advance your career or perform your work, and very importantly, take care of yourself as a working parent also. Number 4, I want you to start talking about parenting and professional overlaps, conflicts, and realities at home and at work more upfront and more confidently. I want you to be able to take all of the working parent stuff that you have to do, like when you have to, not dial into the meeting because you have to run with your kid to the pediatrician, and be able to address that easily and feel like you're on your front foot as you do. Now, that's easier said than done. Every single one of us, pre-pandemic certainly, had been trained or even sort of trained to ourselves to think of not bringing too much of our personal lives into the professional sphere, because it would make us feel, a little unprofessional. And when we talked about work obligations with our kids, it often left us feeling a little guilty or apologetic. Oh, I'm so sorry, I won't be able to make family dinner tonight because I have to stay late at work. I have to work a double shift. I have to stay late at the office. The more I talk to working parents, and I've spoken to so many at this point, the more I have realized that this communications, being able to talk about what happens at that intersection of what we need to do at work, what we need to do at home, and to just talk about it and have a conversation, is one of the key main consistent stressors for all working parents. So let's flip that over and let's make it something that you know how to address easily and to deal with a great bit more confidence. And that is by using a new framework for talking about kind of when those conflicts do occur, or when you do want to talk about your parenting responsibilities in the professional sense or vice versa. And that's to put what it is that you need to say into a new frame, and to have that frame be bounded on 4 sides by your priorities, your next steps, your commitment, and your enthusiasm. Let's say, for example, that it's your child's first day back after several months of distance learning. My kids just went back earlier this week after months and months of being away, and it was a big deal, a big transition for them and a big transition for us as parents, and we wanted to make sure it went right. If that's the case for you, And you do need to take the morning off or a portion of the morning off in order to be there for your son or your daughter. Instead of going into work and, or calling somebody or being on a Zoom and kind of apologetically explaining that you won't be able to participate in, the conversations that are happening, the meeting that's happening, that you'll have to miss some amount of work or, sort of ask for forgiveness, instead of feeling like you're on your back foot as you do that, or explaining or apologizing, getting into that mode. Instead, think priorities, next steps, commitment, enthusiasm. Think about framing what you have to do in this way instead, saying, I know that we want to get to a great client meeting next week on Monday of next week. My next steps on the document are to input all of the changes that we've been getting, that we have as a team have agreed on, to make certain that we have another good draft and then we can do another pass at it before we put it to bed, before we send it over to the client for their reactions and then have that conversation. Tomorrow morning, I'm going to be out for 3 hours because it's my son's first day back at school after 6 months of distance learning. And I really want to make sure that goes well for him. But I'll be back online at noon and I'll be able to finish up those edits and those comments, before close of business, and I'll get it around to the team. And I'm really looking forward to your next reaction because I think the document's going to be in a great place. If you can convey what you have to do in that way, first of all, it's going to be a lot more comfortable. You're not apologizing, you're making a statement. Second, it allows you to actually remain completely authentic. You've talked about the parenting responsibility that you have, and you've done it, you've put it right up out front. You haven't sort of hidden anything or felt like you had to apologize. You've been direct about it. You've been true to yourself. But you've also, at the same time, showcased the totality of what you're doing, that you are committed on the job, that you are really focused on having a great client meeting, that you are thinking about how to help the team move forward, that you are committed to your work. You've controlled the narrative instead of allowing somebody else to say, oh, she's out tomorrow morning or he's out tomorrow morning. It allows them to understand she's out tomorrow morning, but she's completely on top of all of this work and we're going to have a great client meeting. Likewise, you can use this priorities, next steps, commitment, enthusiasm framework for when you're talking to your kids also. There's nothing worse, and we've all been there or will be there. There's nothing worse than having to explain to a really upset young child or bigger child that you have to go off to work or you're about to leave on a business trip. And I know so many parents right now who, as we transition into our new normal, quote unquote, are thinking about that increased separation. What happens when I do have to travel again? When I do have to be away from home more for work? How do I explain that to the kids? How do I make it not be a blow? Well, instead of apologizing and saying, oh, I know, mom or dad has to go to work now. I wish we could be together, or I'll come back. I'll see you after, 3 days, but I have to go now. I have to get to the airport. Instead of doing that and adding to some of the upset and the tension and feeling crummy yourself, instead thinking about using priorities, next steps, commitment, enthusiasm to talk to your child and to say, mom's got to leave now for work, but I'm going to be home at 6:30 p.m. tonight. And it'll still be light out. And I'm really excited because we can take a trip to, we can take a walk down to the park together. And we can get in just a couple of minutes on the seesaw and the swings before we have to come home and eat dinner. And I'm really looking forward to it. And mom promises that we're going to do that today. Have a great day. That, again, allows you to tell your child that, yeah, you are going off to work. You don't have to hide or, apologize for that. But it also allows you to be and feel like the committed, caring, loving parent, the kind who takes your child to the park. So the next time that you have to think about talking about your parenting responsibilities in the professional sphere and vice versa, I want you to think about, instead of being stressed or thinking about, I really need to kind of get this person's approval or apologize for what I'm doing, think about reframing your comments, of scripting yourself just a little bit using that tool. Number 5, learn to tame, but not eliminate, your difficult working parent emotions. And by difficult working parent emotions, I'm talking mostly here about guilt and about overwhelm. Now, I have not spoken to more than a handful of working parents, literally a single handful of working parents, during all the time, the decade that I've been doing this research, this work, and as I was writing my book. I have not spoken to more than just a couple of people who don't report behind closed doors in an interview session or a coaching session that I'm having with them, that don't report having some degree of both of those, of feeling a little bit conflicted about the intersection of who they want to be as a professional and as a parent, and going back and forth and feeling not great feelings about, about some of those conflicts, and also feeling overwhelmed, feeling like you have too much to do. So I say that, first of all, to tell, just to let you know that if you are feeling those, that you are completely normal, that you are not only normal, you are in the majority. And in fact, in some ways, if you didn't report those feelings, I would be a little bit concerned for you. If you said, no, I have leave for work every morning without a backward glance, it's a little bit of a question mark as to how well bonded, or are you thinking enough about your kids and so forth. So it can be a positive signal. Here's the thing. You are never going to be able to eliminate guilt or overwhelm. And in fact, because you are committed to both spheres of your life. And in fact, in some ways, I don't want you to even try to completely get rid of them, because they are good reminders of how totally committed, how thoughtful you are about both spheres. But at the same time, I do want you to be able to de-escalate them, so that when you feel crummy, when you feel lousy, when you feel guilty, when you feel like everything is coming at you, you just have a wall of tasks and to-do items that are coming at you, and you don't know how to handle them all, and you feel tired and ground down, to be able to take it sort of a pin and put it into that balloon and just have it deflate a little bit. Here are some of my favorite techniques for doing that. And they're ones that I want you to try, practicing or doing today. I think a lot of us during the pandemic have felt kind of guilty and really overwhelmed as working parents. So give these a try. You have nothing to lose. They cost nothing. The first is restaking. Restaking is simply the act of replanting your own personal flag and identity when you're in really rocky emotional territory, when you do feel guilt, when you're starting to use words, like guilty about yourself, when you're telling yourself, oh, I'm a horrible parent, or I should be working harder, whatever it is. Let's say, for example, that you told your child that you would spend the evening with him playing board games or just hanging out. And all of a sudden, a really important work call comes up, or there's an emergency, or your boss gets in touch, and you have to turn away from your child, contrary to your promise, and attend to what's going on professionally. Well, you're going to probably feel not so great about that, because you're breaking your word and you want to be a loving, attentive parent. And here you are turning away. So the guilt begins to surge. Instead of telling yourself, oh, I feel so guilty, or what kind of mother does this? Or, that's just another way I've kind of, broken my promise to myself and to my child that I would spend more time with them. Instead of doing that, replant your flag. In other words, instead of feeling like you're acting in conflict to your values and identity and who you are, remind yourself that you're doing the very best you can to act in alignment with your values and identity and who you are. So say yes to your inside, to yourself. Say, yes, I did have to turn away from my child, or I did have to not spend time with him playing the board game that I thought I was going to be able to play with him this evening, when he was done with school and I was done with work, because I had to turn to a really important work matter. That work is work that I do in order to support our family, to provide us a safe place to live and enough to eat, to ensure our own security in the future, to save for my kids' college. That's work that I do not despite parenting, but because I'm a committed and loving mother or father. In other words, bring the circle back around to where you started, which is your commitment to your child and how that is unassailable. Yes, you did have to turn away. You did have to take that important phone call, but your act of doing that is actually anchored in the commitment that you have to your family. The next technique is to push back on yourself. Pretend the next time guilt begins to surge up that you're your own best friend, or that you're kind of a neutral third-party outsider. You're your own coach. Think, instead of just allowing the tape to play, thinking, oh, I feel so guilty, I'm a terrible mom or dad, I shouldn't have done that, I should be working harder, fill in the blanks, whatever that negative tape that's playing for you. I want you to pretend that you're outside of things a little bit, that you're a step away. And I want you to start pushing back on all of those statements and assumptions that underlie them by using one single word, which is really. Here's what this looks like. Let's say, we'll use the same example. You did have to turn away from your child because you had an important work call, and all the guilt and all the, kind of emotion begins to swell. Say to yourself, am I really a terrible mom or dad? Am I really guilty of doing something? Guilt is a strong word. Am I really guilty? Is that really an appropriate way to describe what I did this evening? Am I really not a committed professional because I only worked 9 hours today and my kids interrupted me a bunch during that instead of working 14 hours in the day? Am I really not doing my best? Is it really an appropriate expectation that I should be sleeping even less than I am so that I can work more or so that I can be more present as a parent? In other words, just take the reality of the situation and take your own reaction to it and begin to push back, begin to deflate it a little bit. As you use this really technique, things will begin to de-escalate, and you may find yourself getting a little bit indignant and saying, well, of course I'm not a terrible person or guilty or a terrible parent or a lazy professional. Of course, none of those things is true. Or you may find yourself even just beginning to chuckle a little bit because the statements that you have been saying to yourself so frequently and so readily will immediately begin to feel preposterous. But whatever the case, at the end of the really pushback, you'll be back in a better mental frame. Now, we've talked about 2 different ways to try and tame guilt. But what if your challenge or problem is that you just have too much coming at you? If your to-do list, like mine, like every other working parent's, is so incredibly long that if you unfurled it, it would stretch from where here I am in New York City all the way out into California. And no matter how hard I work or you work, and no matter how much we try and check off in the course of the day, it always feels like there's more, and the list never shrinks. It never gets any shorter. If that's where you are right now, that sense of being on a treadmill that you can't get off and it's running really fast and there's no off switch, if that's the case for you, I want you to start upending that feeling by using a new technique and by keeping a new kind of list. Instead of a to-do list or a calendar with all the things that you are committed to and that you have to show up for, I want you to keep a done list. You can do this on Post-it notes around your laptop, or you can do this, my favorite is to do it on an iPhone in the notes section. So when you're on the go, you can look at this list anytime. And I want you to throw every item, big, small, professional, personal, parenting, I want you to put all of it onto your done list. Whether that's finishing a big project on time or under budget, having a really great meeting with a particular customer who it's difficult to have a really great meeting with, throwing in a load of laundry, helping your 8-year-old child out with his math worksheets this evening, whatever it is, put it on your done list. And then when you do have that incredible feeling of overwhelm, like I can't even face my to-do list, or when you do just feel ground down and tired, that's when your energy is at an ebb. I want you to pull out your done list and I want you to look over it and to read all of the things over the past day, week, month that you have actually checked off that list, that you've completed, that you've shown up for. As you do that, you'll be struck by a couple of things. First, by the enormous amount of things that you are doing and accomplishing every single day, and how those things have aggregated into a mountain of different things that you've checked off the list, right, that are done. But it'll also help you as you look at that big pile of things that's completed. It will also help remind you of the incredible depth and totality of your commitment, both as a professional and as a parent. It'll anchor you back in a sense of accomplishment instead of in a sense of just being daunted by everything that you have to do. If you want to take this technique up even a little bit further, and if you've had a particularly difficult time perhaps throughout the pandemic, a way to broaden it is to give yourself what I think of as a pandemic performance review. Now, I know when I say performance review, everybody sort of cringes. We think of performance reviews as that once a year thing where we get negative feedback and we sort of steel ourselves up and hear good things and bad things that we don't want to hear from our boss. And, it can be a kind of upsetting time. I want you to leave that idea behind because this is a very different kind of performance review. It's the done list, but over the course of the entire pandemic, over the course of a year. Maybe you feel like you haven't been doing so well in each of your roles throughout the pandemic. But if you look at everything that you've done, everything that you've accomplished work-wise over the course of the past year, the ways in which you've kept the wheels on the bus in terms of your home, in terms of your family, all the logistics, the number of meals you've prepared, the number of homework assignments that you've helped with, whatever it is, and you think about those as a total, again, it will give you that sense of satisfaction and accomplishment that this has been an incredibly difficult time. But I have gone to unbelievable lengths to fulfill my roles and my responsibilities and to be the person that I wanted to be in the different spheres, important spheres of my life. Now, moving from feelings and into our last idea and thought and recommendation for you. And it's a particularly timely one, but it's also timeless. Number 6 is to take away what you learned from the pandemic. To think really, really carefully over the past year, which is not a year that any one of us would have hoped for, would have wanted, and that we wouldn't wish on anyone else ever, on our kids, on future generations at all. But over the course of the past year, you have developed certain specific compensatory ways of dealing. You've found certain techniques, you've developed new skills, you've got a new schedule, you've developed new habits that maybe were very hard won and in the course of enormous pressure, but that can be the ones that can help you be more effective, more confident, more capable as a professional and as a parent going forward. Maybe you've gotten really, really good at working when there's noise distraction in the background. Or maybe you used to be a little bit of a perfectionist, but you've been able to let some of that go during the pandemic and just kind of ship things, get them out the door because you haven't had time to hover and to make tons of tiny extra changes and to worry about if something's just right. Maybe you've developed a new habit where you are eating dinner more with your family, and that's something that you want to commit to and try and keep up over time. Whatever those things are, do a comprehensive review, make a list for yourself. And you're not going to be able to stick to everything, and you probably don't want to. But I want you to think of 2 or 3 specific things that you want to bring forward with you that are under your control and that you can bring forward with you, both professionally and personally, in that parenting, with that parenting hat on. And to think about how they will enable you to achieve the success you want. Maybe you can focus more now upon return to the office. Maybe you'll be more bonded to your child because you do make a commitment to eating dinner together a certain number of nights per week. In other words, take this crisis and put it firmly past you. Allow yourself to move on, but bring the small amounts of good along with you. Now, I've shared all 6 different key critical strategies that I want you to have, the arrows that I want you to have in your quiver. These are things that you can action right away, that you can hang up on this call and just begin doing. But I also want to acknowledge the fact that these are only 6, right? You and I both know that working parenthood can't be solved in 30 minutes, in 35 minutes of a conversation, or with just 6 simple approaches. It's a big topic. I've dedicated my adult career to it and to thinking about all the different sort of kernels and different of advice and different things we need as working parents and different approaches we can take. Those can, in schooling, in job changes, and being part of a dual career couple, in thinking about, how to keep your children healthfully fed when you're working so many long hours. And so much of that I've included in my book. So we could keep going here, but we're going to stop because it's important now to think about which of these 6 you are going to take forward and to also begin having the conversation with your partner, with your community members, with your colleagues, with your friends about what you've learned, about ways you may want to take some of this forward. And then importantly, to get those other people's pieces of advice, their recommendations. So take all of this on board, trust yourself to use the right bits and pieces for you. We're going to turn now to Q&A, but think of this as the start of a conversation, as a way to open up yourself to some new techniques and strategies that you can then evolve for yourself, add to, share with others, learn more from others, and keep pushing yourself forward towards success and satisfaction as a working parent. Now, with that, let's turn it over to you and hear what's top of mind for you, different questions, comments, things that you want to add in. And for that, Julia, I know you've been keeping an eye on the comment section and have some questions for us.
Yeah, we do have some questions, so let's get started. You've addressed what I can do as a working parent, but what about doing this together with my partner? Advice and tips for couples, particularly dual career.
Yes. So first of all, that's a terrific question. Just to back up for a second, there are 52 million American working parents. More than half of those are part of dual career couples, and another 25% are single parents. So we all are in different family structures. We all have different, types of setups at home and support at home, but it's top of mind for the vast majority of people. How am I going to do this with a partner, or how am I going to do this on my own? So I love this question because it addresses the reality that so many of us face. So here are a couple of pieces of specific advice. The first is that together, the two of you, a great technique is to, on a regular basis, look forward over your weekly calendar. You might do that every evening instead of once per week, but have it be regularized. And weekly tends to make things easy. It doesn't take up too much time. You can just get together for 15, 20, 30 minutes. Look at what you both have professionally and parenting wise over the course of the next week and how you're going to handle it. Have that formal check-in. Now, I say that because when I coach and counsel working parents who are part of a couple, or I coach and counsel those couples themselves, there are really two things going on. The first is when they feel overwhelmed, or when there's friction between the two. The first is that there's just so much to do, right? There's a high volume. They're taking care of and doing so much. But the second thing that really amplifies that problem, that sense of being, just overwhelmed to-do list wise or calendar wise, is a sense of improvisation between the two of you and the conflicts that improvisation can create. So if both of you suddenly realize that you have really important meetings and you have to stay late at work and neither of you can do the daycare pickup, it's probably going to lead to some immediate stress, but it also may lead to an argument. Now, having that conflict or having those two important meetings or feeling like you're running from work to the daycare pickup, whatever it is, you may not be able to completely alleviate that. You probably won't. There's a lot to do. But what you want to do is avoid being in a situation where you're trying to figure out those things on the fly or where you're just arguing about them, which is what a weekly check-in will allow you to avoid. So know that you'll have a lot to do, but think about how you'll handle it. And as you look over the course of your week, try to identify the points of real pressure, the times when you won't have enough time, when you feel like you have to be in two places at once, when you have a major deadline, when school pickup is at a different time, when your child may need you to be present or extra present at that certain point, and try and have a mutual game plan for those. That's the first thing. The second thing, which builds on the first, is when you're doing that weekly check-in or that regular check-in, to always start that check-in by looking back at the week that you've had and looking at some of the positives. So thinking not just, oh, here are all the things we have to do and here's where the stresses in our coming week are going to be, but looking back and giving your partner some shout out, some high five for what you were able to do, they were able to do for you, or what you were able to do together. So thanks so much for being able to cover for me, or doing daycare pickup on the day that you don't usually do it. Or, I think it really was great that we were able to get out to the park together or all together on Saturday afternoon and just have a break, even though we both had really, really busy weekends getting ready for stuff this coming week. Whatever it is, anchor your conversations in that positive, because it will give you a better frame from which to talk about some of the stuff that's a little bit more stressful. And it will also give you a feeling of momentum. Like, I'm moving forward here as a working parent. We are doing a good job. You'll just feel more in the driver's seat if you do so. So start trying those two tactics is my top piece of advice. And you'll see a lot of the drama and a lot of the strain that exists between really busy couples come a lot down.
Okay, that's great advice. Here's another question. I work on a small team of 3 people total, and I'm the only employee with kids. How do I voice my struggles while still maintaining their trust and set realistic expectations with people that may not understand the role of a working parent?
Yeah. So this is a situation that so many of us have been in over the course of the pandemic, maybe because you're in a small organization or one that doesn't have a lot of other working parents around it. Not only are you communicating some new or unique needs, that are based on what's going on in the world, but you're doing it in a very pressured time and across difference to people who may not understand. You're worried about that reaction and how people are going to receive, what you say to them. The best way to get around that, and I've heard this from so many different working parents, is to signal that this conversation that you're having with them is really a two-way street. Every single one of us is going through life in general, but the pandemic in particular, with a lot of stresses and strains. Those strains may be from parenting while working really hard. They may be from dealing with elder care or loneliness or other work pressures. We all have things going on. If you come in and you start talking about your working parent stuff without signaling that you're listening to or attuned to what the other person may be going through, it's going to come across as I need this, but I'm not talking to you, or it has some small risk of doing that. So as you have those conversations, think about being very upfront about the fact that you're just as interested in what they have going on as you're willing to disclose what you have going on. And the elegant way to do that, the kind of easy way to do it, is to state it directly or to ask open-ended questions. To say something like, I, right now, because I have 3-year-old twins, have some specific, scheduling stuff and ways I'm able to show up for work. And here's what that looks like. And I, wanted to give you insight onto it or wanted to ask your permission. But I realize that's the specifics I have going on. I know that you have, I'm certain you have your own pressures, the things that you're dealing with. And I'm not totally aware what they are, but I just wanted to let you know I'm respectful of them. Or you can simply ask people who you may not be, all that familiar with the kind of the details of their lives, questions like, this pandemic has been, the past month or several months or whole year, it's been really hard. How are you getting on? Or is there anything work-wise or personally that you want me to be aware of as we go into this really, really challenging 6 weeks when we're going to be working on this really difficult project? Is there anything you want me to be aware of that, speaks to kind of everything you're coping and grappling with? Because I've told you about my kids, but in other words, open the door and signal that you see this, you're talking as partners effectively, that you see this as a two-way street, and that you're not promising to try and accommodate everything that somebody might ask you to based on what they have in their life, just as you can't get any promises yourself, but that you're in that dialogue. And that usually sets a really good basis for problem solving, for conversation, for understanding, because people know that you're coming at that, from the right place.
Okay, good. And then kind of in that same kind of conversation, the next question, the person wanted to know that they've been in their current job for 11 years and they're able to leave at 4:30 specifically for daycare pickup, and they want to look for a new job. So how do they bring up that fact in interviews with the new job? Like, would they look less dedicated than other candidates by saying that in the interview that, oh, I will need to leave at 4:30? How do they get that flexibility in an upcoming job interview?
Yeah, so I have had tons of working parents ask me this question recently. And as we come out the pandemic, I know so many people who are thinking about changing jobs. I saw a statistic recently that something like 45% of American professionals are thinking about making some kind of job or career change as we come to the back end, or what we hope is the back end of this pandemic. So you're not alone. Here's the best way to think about it and attack that problem. Job interviewing and the job assessment process is just that. It's a process, and it really has 3 phases. The first is just a general sort. Is this person capable and credentialed enough to do the job? Do they have the skills? Yes, no. The second phase is where real assessment happens, where you tend to have, a lot of interviews, a lot of back and forth with the company or with the organization, or they're, asking more about your background. And then the third phase is where you get towards making a commitment, where you discuss details in terms of an offer, and if all goes well, you end up accepting it. If you think about those phases, it's a lot easier to think about where and when and how you would bring up this, I need to leave at 4:30. Because if you mention it in the first phase, when they're just saying, does this person have the skills needed to become an emergency room nurse at our hospital, or to do this social media marketing job in our organization? If you start talking about your needs and boundaries and the daycare pickup times in that first phase, it's going to be irrelevant. It's going to be a detail, a distraction. It doesn't get you towards that next phase, which is where you want to go. In phase 2, though, you're in get to know you mode. And there you can begin to kind of gently suss out whether or not this organization is working parent friendly. You can do it in very direct ways by asking about how's the work-life balance here, but you can also do it in more subtle ways that feel more comfortable. And that can be if you see a family photo in the background of a Zoom, say, oh, are those your kids? And then I'll see how the person reacts and says, oh, yes, they are my children. There's these ages. How old are your kids? Allow the conversation to evolve a little bit naturally from there, and you'll begin to get a gut sense of how well the hiring manager and the organization approaches and reacts to working parents. And as you go, you can share some more information about the fact that, yeah, you do have kids in daycare. Then when you get to that third phase, when you're talking about, details about, salary, about benefits, about hours that you're going to work and so forth, it's at that point that you can really just make that part of the package. They'll know you have kids at that point, and you can say, the way I tend to work here, in my career is I usually work, 9-hour days, or I start at, 8 a.m. in the morning and I work until 4:30 when I have to do daycare pickup. And then I'm online in the evenings, or whatever, you fill in the blanks, whatever the situation is. At that point, it just seems like an administrative detail. It doesn't shock anybody because they know you have kids, but you also haven't derailed yourself by, at the very front end of the process, talking a ton about your working parent needs before you've been able to really sell yourself as a professional and to really generate some good interest in you. So pick your spots, think of that process, phase 1, 2, 3. You're doing the information sharing and getting in phase 2. And then you're coming to that firm agreement about that 4:30 pickup right as you get to that point of offer, when nobody will be surprised by it.
Okay, great. Another good question. I'm facing a transition back to the office or the old way of working, but I want to keep working at home and retain the flexibility I've gained. Any advice on how to ask for that?
Right. So the most important way or thing to think about as you ask, and then importantly, negotiate, which is slightly different than ask, but negotiate for that flexibility, is to frame your ask and what you want to do in terms that your manager and the organization can understand. Your manager may be the most important, most supportive person in the entire world to working parents, or not. But regardless, it's your manager's job to think about results, performance, profitability, how the team is doing, to really make certain things are on the right track. So what's going to resonate to your manager and to the organization or to your HR representative, whoever it is not what you would prefer to do, or not what works best for your family. Even if that has emotional resonance to them, their job, again, is to make sure that the organization, institution, product line, it's everything else is successful. So frame your ask and then your negotiations in terms that resonate. So if you can convey the fact that, during the pandemic, while I was working at home, I was able to not only meet my sales quotas, but I actually exceeded them by 10% for each of the past 3 months while working full-time at home. And I'm confident I'll be able to do that going forward. Or maybe you can say, without the 45-minute commute each way, what that allows me to do is actually work longer and to have more of those outgoing sales calls. In other words, frame your ask as a business one instead of a personal one, but also feel comfortable, again, in a business frame, conveying that what you're requesting, what you're asking for, whether that's working from home 2 days a week, let's say, is something that will allow the organization and the manager to retain you over the long term, that they get to keep a high performer, that they don't have to go out and look for a new person to fill your seat. And say, I've been very committed to the organization, but having that extra flexibility or being able to retain this, work from home arrangement, that's really what's going to keep me, bonded here and excited and raring to go for the longer term. So think about things from the other person's shoes and frame your comments accordingly. And then also be willing to say to yourself, where do I draw the line? So if you negotiate or if you ask for 5 days a week work from home and the organization is transitioning back to everyone back in the office, that's pretty far apart. Be very clear with yourself along where you want to draw the line. What's really going to work? Would 3 days per week be okay? Is it 2? Is it being able to be home when there's important commitments or school things? So be very detailed in terms of your go, no go, what you want and what you'll accept. And then get in there, but think about it and present it as a business opportunity as opposed to here's what I want because it works for me. And that'll tend to have stickiness and resonance, and it'll make it easier for people to say yes.
Okay, great. Well, our time was just about up. Daisy, did you have any final comments you'd like to make?
Yeah, I'm going to suggest that each and every one of us, as we think about these tools and techniques and the other ones that we've heard or have come to ourselves, that we use them as actively as we can for the following reasons. It can be time consuming. It can take a lot out of us sometimes to think about how to step forward as working parents, but for the following reasons, which is our kids. 25 years from now, 30 years from now, whatever it is, when your children are, or the next generation is working the way you're working, when they're raising their own families, we don't want to be having these conversations again. We don't want to be worried about how do I ask for flexibility. We want this to all be a thing of the past and for working parenthood to be normalized, celebrated, accepted. And in order to do that, we've got to really row this hoe right now. We've got to use these techniques and help push ourselves and all of us together forward.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. The recording will be available tomorrow if anybody would like to rewatch this. We did post a takeaway tool that Daisy provided. If you would like to look at that, that should be found right below the video, as well as a link to her book. I thank you all for joining us today. And thank you, Daisy, for your time. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.